From 94.9 KUOW Seattle, I'm Megan Sukes. There are stories about the lone person standing up against the big corporation and bringing it to its knees, but this isn't one of those stories. This is about an inside man. Bruce Herbert is a money guy. He founded the Seattle investment firm Newground, and what he does is he buys shares in corporations for his clients, and when they get enough shares, they ask those corporations to examine their policies around issues like labor and the environment.
As shareholders, we own the company. We have a vested interest that's inextricably linked and directly in line with management's interest in terms of the financial outcome and financial integrity of the process. So when we bring something up, they have to listen.
Back in 2009, Bruce's company got the ear of McDonald's. He worked with other McDonald's investors to ask the company to study the level of pesticides in their potatoes, the ones they use for French fries and hash browns.
Now, McDonald's is the largest potato buyer in North America, perhaps the world. And so if they made substantive changes in their pesticide use, well, then the effects would be extraordinary, because then it wouldn't just be them. It would be any supplier that ever hoped to get a contract with McDonald's.
To get something like this before a corporate board of directors, there are a lot of rules to follow, and the whole process is overseen by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And one of the things shareholders can't do is mandate a change at a corporation. So that's why Bruce and the other shareholders asked McDonald's to study the level of pesticides rather than just asking them to stop pesticides altogether.
Well, the first thing the company did do, actually, was challenge it at the SEC.
Typically, that would mean shareholders would mount a counter-challenge, and there might be a bunch of back and forth with the Securities and Exchange Commission. But Bruce tried something a little bit different. He got the shareholders together to write a letter that said,
"Totally understand you're challenging it at the SEC. Totally understand you want to preserve your rights under the law. That's a given. No worries there. However, what I don't understand is why we didn't also at the same time receive an invitation to dialogue."
Bruce has been doing this a long time, so he knew that the words invitation to dialogue would get results in this situation, especially because he also warned McDonald's that
whenever McDonald's and pesticides are used in the same sentence, it is harmful to shareholder value. And that brought the company to the table. They did invite us to dialogue, and then out of that, basically the challenge went by the wayside, and we reached an agreement in really very short order for them, whereby they agreed that they would study the pesticide use.
Bruce and the other shareholders worked with McDonald's to draw up an explicit timeline for the study.
And every single deadline that we had along the way, they were every couple of months, kind of keep it on a short leash. I think every single time they called us up ahead of the deadline and said, we've actually finished this portion. Would you mind if we started on the next portion a little early?
And then one day during a phone conference,
the fellow who was tasked with McDonald's was talking. He was leading the conversation, and this was maybe about 8 weeks in, 10 weeks in, something like that. And he was talking, and something just registered with me. And it was a conference call. We'd never met any of these people in person. And I stopped the call, and I asked him, I said, when did this stop being just a series of to-do items on a long project list for you and start being something that you were actually excited about? And there was a long pause. And he said, I realize that what we're working on now will make the world a better place for my grandchildren. And that's when I knew that there was real substantive buy-in, and that this was probably going to go a lot further because of our developing a relationship with an internal advocate than it ever could by just us pushing, from the outside.
Bruce can talk like a money man, but he doesn't necessarily think like a money man. And that's because he didn't start out as a money man. During college, he studied Buddhism, and through a program at the University of Puget Sound, he traveled around Asia, including India.
In India, there's a whole industry around stealing children, kidnapping children from one region of the country, taking them to another part of the subcontinent where they can't be found, purposefully maiming them so that they will be more effective in tugging at the heartstrings, and then putting them out on the street, just like, not for prostitution, but just like, prostitutes sent out to get their quota for the day. And to encounter a child like that, whose life is such a wreck, And then to realize that if you help them by giving some money, you're actually making this profitable. That is just so galvanizing in terms of understanding what works and what doesn't work, and what capitalism, this whole economic system really means, and what it really is asking of us. Capitalism asks us to be greedy, and asks us to think only about ourselves, and asks us to forget that we live in a context that's utterly dependent upon our community and connection, and that we are stronger and better and more safe and more, we have more abundance when we work together, when we forego the last inch of the deal for ourselves and think of the common good instead. And that's been taught by every spiritual tradition since the history and dawning of humankind, and it's taught by every other type of philosophy as well, and it's only forgotten since the Chicago School of Economics decided to change the meaning of and integrity of economic practice. And
what are you referring to?
Milton Friedman. He's the one that said greed is good, and basically, by focusing on maximum profitability, you're actually benefiting culture and society in the best way, and it's nothing could be more ludicrous.
Bruce can level that kind of accusation at modern capitalism, but he chooses to work in money anyway, because he believes
money is the arbiter of value in this culture. And so if you want to try and change things substantively, you have to deal with what the reality is.
Bruce admits there is a time to get angry and take a stand of righteous outrage.
But I don't find that that's where to start. And if you just start by vilifying somebody else, they're just going to dig in their heels and not make any motion at all. And we can't wave a wand and have corporate America and capitalism as it's practiced in this country be different. We have to engage it. And so we try to encourage the good behavior. You try to discourage the bad behavior. But either way, you have to be engaged over the long haul.
And Bruce points to the outcome of his shareholder engagement with McDonald's. After McDonald's studied the levels of pesticide in a portion of their potatoes, McDonald's decided to roll the study out to all of their potato suppliers.
They also said they want to take it to every one of their other agricultural crops, whether it's onions or lettuce, tomatoes, and so forth, anything that they use in their salads and on their burgers. So everything else, they've already taken it out to their consortiums that they're parts of in Canada, in Europe, as well as in Asia. And the last thing that they said was, this shouldn't just be a McDonald's issue. It actually should be an industry-wide issue.
This is a great success story, but it's not always like that.
Unfortunately, these shareholder engagements don't always turn out this rapidly and this well. I mean, that's where most of my gray hair comes from, is when they don't. But it's sort of like you just persevere and you realize the humanity of the person you're talking to, and they're as much locked in a system as the rest of us. I mean, think of the man who was on that call when I paused and asked, when did this start to really matter to you? He has a different view of his place in the world today. And what will that do in terms of his relationship to his family and to his children and grandchildren when he feels like he's contributing something much more than he can in terms of their college education or whatever? He's creating a world that's worth living in, for them, that otherwise might not have been there. I mean, think about that and what that opportunity is. It boggles the mind. It really makes me feel very, very humble.
Bruce Herbert is the founder of the Seattle-based investment firm Newground. You can find a link to his website, as well as a link to an article about research that was spurred on by McDonald's study at KUOW.org. Keith Hitchcock helped produce this story. I'm Megan Sukes, 94.9 KUOW Seattle.